Hey, look at us being all fancy. Jellies and jams.
Jellies.
It is not green because it's grass-fed beef, as I originally thought. What?
Your apron.
Do you want me to put my apron back on? Is this a symbol for apron? Anyway, hey there, my name is Crystal and I am canning up bone broth today. I've already made the bone broth. I did that last week and I will show you that process now. So this bone broth that I am making is from beef bones from a quarter cow we purchased last year. This grass-fed beef is from a farm up the road from us. In addition to these beef bones, we only have a few more roast short ribs and some other ground beef left over. I took these beef bones out of the freezer a couple of days ago and have left them in the fridge to defrost. This is my first time making homemade bone broth and I'm excited to see how it turns out. I roasted the beef bones in a 375-degree oven for about an hour. Then I removed the bones from the casserole dishes and put them into the roaster. This is our 18-quart roaster. I took one of the casserole dishes, took the bones out of that and put them into the roaster, and then I added the quartered onions and garlic heads into that same casserole dish and put it back into the oven for about 45 minutes for those to cook down a little bit. The other casserole dish, I removed the bones and then I added a little bit of water to help scrape up some of that baked on goodness at the bottom of the casserole dish and added that to the roaster also. So I poured in all of that stuff into the roaster. While I waited for the onions to cook in the oven, I added all the other ingredients to the roaster. A cup of apple cider vinegar, the carrots, the celery, 2 bay leaves, fresh thyme and rosemary from our garden, the only thing I can harvest during winter time outside. Fresh parsley, this is from the store because I don't have any growing right now. Some peppercorn medley and salt. I turned the roaster on to about 250 degrees just to start, and at this point I wasn't sure how warm I wanted it because I've never made it before, so I just turned it on to 250 just to get it warmed up. I was gonna wait and see if I wanted it higher or lower depending on if it was boiling or not. When the onions and garlic were finished, I added those to the roaster too and also deglazed the bottom of that casserole dish with a little bit of water, scraped up all that stuff, all the drippings, and then added that to the roaster as well. Then I put the lid on the roaster and let it sit for about a day. I really wanted to get the broth boiling and mixed up really good, so I did turn it up to 350 degrees for a little while, and then I turned it back down to around 300, and that is where it stayed most of the day. When it was time for bed, I turned it down to around 250. Let that sit overnight, and then the next day I turned it back up to 300. Later on, around dinner time, I want to say, I turned it off altogether, let it cool slightly. I needed to strain the broth, so all of the stuff, the bones, the vegetables, and all the things, I needed to strain it. So I used the large mesh strainer and then I strained all of the broth into the bowls. I really like these bowls because they have lids and they clearly show how many quarts they hold, so I'm able to gauge how many canning jars I will need. I also like that when the fat collects on the top of the bowl, it's got a wide opening and allows me to easily remove the fat. The reason why we separate the fat out of the broth is to make sure that when we're canning up the broth that the lids seal good to the jars. If there's too much fat, it might prevent the lids from sealing to the jars. Once I had the broth all strained in the bowls, I let it cool a little bit on the countertop before I moved it to the refrigerator. I made sure the lids were on good and then I stacked them up in our refrigerator, and they've been there for, I want to say, 4 days now, and I am really excited. I am ready to can this broth up. So I'm gonna get the broth out of the refrigerator onto the counter and I'm gonna get all that fat out, and then we're gonna heat it up using the electric water bath canner that I got for Christmas. I'm gonna be using that to reheat up our bone broth. The 2 resources I am referencing when I do my canning process, one is the National Center for Home Food Preservation website. I will put the link in the description below, and I've also looked at and read from this book here, the blue book, Guide to Preserving. On page 104 there's a section here on beef stock. So those are the 2 that I'm using. I've looked at them both. It's pretty straightforward, easy to understand, and I'm excited to get this done. Hey, look at us being all fancy. For Christmas I got this electric water bath canner and I'm so excited. I'm going to be using it to reheat the broth. It's got a spout here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to use that because there might be fat left over in the broth. It might clog up the spout and I don't want to do that. So I'll probably just ladle into the jars like I normally do. But it's so nice and I can't wait to can in this. Jellies and jams.
Jellies.
In the summertime, I'm so excited. Alright, so first we're going to find the plug for it. I've never used it before. I've already cleaned it. This stuff gelled up so nicely, but it must have fell in the refrigerator and so it didn't get a nice layer of fat that I would want. But that's okay. I'll still be able to use it. And then I have this one here. Look at that. It's awesome. And this one. Big layer of beef fat on top. This is the 2.5 quart Pyrex. Woo! Cut down the middle. Oh no! That's one. So good. It's kind of funny because the fat is kind of green. Is that because it's grass-fed? It's green because when I was making the bone broth, I added in fresh thyme and rosemary and parsley and a bunch of other things that tinted it green. It is not green because it's grass-fed beef, as I originally thought. Alright, now this one's going to be a little trickier. It was a little messy. I think it must have got banged around the refrigerator a little bit. Now I'm going to, well, plug it in would help. Oh man, I'm gonna put it right there between medium and high. And we will see how that does. While I wait for the broth itself to come back up to a boil, I am going to get my canning jars ready, clean up the stove, and make sure the pressure canner has all of its parts and doohickeys all ready to go. And then I'll be back. The broth is cooking in the electric canner. And then I also have the pressure canner here, has about 2 to 3 inches of water in it that I have up to a simmer. And I also have the canning jars right here next to it so that they can warm up a little bit before I put the broth in. Alright, so here's what the bone broth looks like. Whoopsies. It is quite steamy, but that is what it looks like. Very romantic with the soft glow there. I have one of the hot jars here. This is a regular mouth quart size ball jar. And I already have my lids over here washed and ready to go, and the bands as well. I'm going to be ladling in the bone broth, leaving 1 inch headspace. Alright, so it's pretty good. We have about 1 inch of headspace, and now I'm going to clean the rim of the jar with some distilled white vinegar and a t-shirt rag. Now I'm going to put on my lid. And a band. And do finger tight. So the finger tight is just the tips of our fingers. Just like that. And that's it. Now I'm going to move these over to the pressure canner and keep moving forward here. The jars inside of the pressure canner, and now I am going to pressure can them. I got 5 quart size jars of bone broth. I'm going to put the lid on just like that and lock it tight. Now it's locked. Okay, I'm gonna follow the National Center for Home Food Preservation's website for canning, pressure canning meat stock. That's what it's listed at. But under beef, we fall in the category of the altitude between 0 and 2,000 feet. I'm gonna bring the pressure up to 11 pounds. So right now I have the burner at 7.5, and I'm just waiting for a steady flow of steam to be coming out of the vent pipe there. All right, so I've kicked the burner up to a 9, and it is starting to vent a steady flow of steam out the top of the vent pipe. So I'm gonna let that vent for 10 minutes. After the 10 minutes is up, I'm going to take the pressure regulator and place it on top of that vent pipe. I turn the timer off. It's been 10 minutes of the steam steadily leaving the pipe here. I'm gonna go ahead and put the pressure regulator on the vent pipe. Now we wait for the pressure gauge to get up to 11 pounds of pressure. Once it gets up to the 11 pounds of pressure, I'm gonna let that sit there for 25 minutes. Okay, so the timer is going off. They have been in the pressure canner for 25 minutes. Turn the burner off, let this come down and let the pressure gauge come back down to 0, and then we will be back. Pressure canner, I've let it... What?
Your apron.
I don't need it.
I was just asking.
I'm just lifting it. Do you want me to put my apron back on? Is this a symbol for apron? Anyway, pressure canner has come back down to 0, and then the air vent or the cover lock, that's the thing in the back that pops up, that has also dropped down. So I set the timer for 10 minutes, but honestly it's been sitting here a lot longer than 10 minutes. But I'm gonna go ahead and take the cover off and move the jars to a towel on my countertop. Should take that off. And tilt away from the face so we don't get steam blasted. I'm gonna go ahead and let these sit here for another 5 minutes before I lift them out onto the towel. It's been a few minutes. I don't know if it's been 5, but I got all the ingredients for my quiche dinner tonight. So all that's ready to go. Now I'm going to use my jar lifters and take the jars out of the pressure canner. Ooh, they look good. That's how they look. Don't worry, I'm not gonna drop it. These will sit on the counter for at least a day, and then tomorrow I'll make sure that they're completely sealed, remove the rings, put the label on, and then stick them in the pantry where they'll be good for about a year. If they make it, they won't even make it that long though. I mean, they look really, really good. It's the first time I've ever made bone broth. It's from grass-fed beef that was raised right up the road from us, so I'm really excited about it. And I hope you enjoyed this video or found it helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.